Okay. Welcome, everybody. We're going to be getting started here momentarily. It looks like we got a pretty full house, and we want to get going. So I'm going to start off with our moderator's notes. Silence cell phones. You're welcome to turn them off. The hashtag #SkollWF if you want to be tweeting about this cool thing, because of course we'll be talking about social media and tweeting during this session, so you might as well own it and operationalize it while you're here. The session will be filmed, and so we got some cameras there, and that also means that wait for the microphone to actually get to you so that they've actually got your audio, because the primary use of the audio is actually for the filming and not so much for this room, which is a nice, comfortable size for a conversation. And so I think that those are our moderator notes. I'm Jim Fruchterman, your moderator. I'm a Skoll Award winner from way back, more than, well, we've been coming here for 10 years. And a lot of our session today is trying to expose to people who are social entrepreneurs, people who care about social entrepreneurs, sort of how do you interact with the press and effectively advance your social mission. And for some of the people here, some of the new award winners, getting an award is going to be an avalanche of sort of press attention that they're not used to, and actually maybe not know how to tell their story. So we're going to explore those sort of topics today. And I'm just doing it as a geek from Silicon Valley who writes software for disabled people and human rights groups. But I think that we've done press relations badly and sometimes well, and we're really lucky to have a leading press person to come and talk to us about sort of his experiences and get an inside look at what it's like to cover this beat. And Morgan Clendaniel, his background dates way back in social good. He actually was one of the founders of Good Magazine, which is something that was really well regarded. He now is a founding editor of Coexist. Make sure I've got this right. Yeah, and which is at Fast Company, and of course, being a Silicon Valley former tech entrepreneur, Fast Company is sort of one of those major pubs that is really about new and exciting content. And what Morgan gets to actually cover is topics of social change and innovation. So I think we'll just start off and say, Morgan, tell us about yourself, tell us what you do, sure. And we can sit down and yeah, be comfortable.
Great.
Yeah.
I'm Morgan. I'm a senior editor at Fast Company, and I run Coexist, which is a section of our website that's focused on world-changing ideas and innovation. So for those of you who don't know about Fast Company is a business magazine that covers business more broadly and specifically sort of innovation and design and creativity in business. One of the things that we think that sort of sets Fast Company apart from the general business press is a sort of larger belief in the ability of business to do good and affect change. And so Coexist is sort of a reflection of that particular part of our editorial ethos, sort of distilled down into one website. So just like very broadly, Fast Company is a print magazine. It publishes 12 issues a year. We have like a large website that publishes in total probably 50 to 60 stories a day. And so that website has some various subsections that cover Fast Company's different editorial silos. So there's a design one, a creativity one, and then Coexist, which is broadly sort of business for good. And so we publish about 12 stories a day. There's 5 of us, 6 of us, including me. So everyone's doing a sort of mix of editing and writing. Most of the people are reporters who are writing 2 to 3 stories a day, working on 10 to 12 stories probably at any given time, with calls out to various social entrepreneurs and everything else. Just to tell you a little bit more about Coexist. As I said, our tagline is world-changing ideas and innovation. In practice, we sort of consider ourselves a futurism site. We like to say that we're writing about a specific future where a more equitable, cleaner, better world. And we're writing about the people and ideas and projects that are going to take us on the path from where we are now to this sort of future we are envisioning. So to give you a sense of the breadth of stuff that we're covering, what we wrote about today, for instance, we wrote about a study about self-driving cars that it turns out that they create a level of nausea that is beyond normal car sickness. So this unintended consequence of what the self-driving car economy might create, right? So from that to a sort of more efficient solar water heater to a new financial services company that lets you invest in sort of social change portfolios. Like you can invest in just a female CEO portfolio or a curing cancer portfolio, to a Dutch company that is a Dutch internet company that's putting servers in people's houses, sort of diffuse the price and environmental impact of cooling all the servers. Now your heat in your house is provided by an internet server.
Helpful in Holland.
So yeah, exactly. So so across the board, everything from clean tech to social good to education, development, and everything.
Cool.
Yeah. So
well, can you take us to the day of one of your writers?
Sure.
What proportion of the time do they spend doing research or talking to people or writing? And you kind of give us some idea of the number of stories they're working on. But yeah.
So yeah, I think it's important to realize sort of broadly that as the journalism industry is constricting, a fewer amount of people have to do more and more work. So everyone is doing a lot more things probably than they would comfortably like to be doing. Everyone. So I would say the day starts. Everyone is really, everyone has to be a really voracious reader. We have a huge set of sort of other websites that we are reading and constantly sort of trolling for news, especially smaller sites. We're fairly large, so we can sort of pull something up that we've discovered in a smaller site and sort of put our own spin on it. So I would say that is a big chunk of the morning. Once we've sort of figured out what we're going to write about that day, then it's sort of, putting out calls. Because we're doing so many stories and we have a real focus sort of at Fast Company broadly on reporting, we really tend not to do a story unless we've gotten a couple original quotes from someone. So most of the writers are working, as I said, on 10 to 15 things at a time, sort of putting all the calls out that they can and writing the stories as the sort of sources come through for them. So, you have a bunch of things that you're working on, this person calls you back, and so then that story will get done.
So some of these stories get done same day?
Some of them get done the same day, some of them are weeks later.
Wow,
yeah.
Okay. And do you have hard deadlines for some of these stories? Or some of them it's got to get done in the next 2 days or it's not worth it?
Yeah, I would say, and this sort of depends differently sort of on what the media organization is. We are, for the most part, not super breaking news focused because we're writing about just an interesting company that we heard about, and it doesn't necessarily matter when that story goes up, but certainly there are times when a company has breaking news or there's an announcement, and then it's, it has to be done Friday at 4 because that's when this news is coming out, and we need to have it at the same time as everyone else.
I didn't hear a lot about reading press releases.
Yes. Funny that you mentioned it. Yeah, we do not like press releases. I mean, a press release, I guess, implies several things, none of which are very good. I would say, the first one is that they've sent this exact same thing to a lot of other people, and so, the general information is the same everywhere, and a lot of people are going to be writing the exact same story.
Okay.
I would say also it implies that we do not necessarily have a personal relationship with the person who is sending it, because they would have sent us something more than a press release, and that is not great. And generally, it's just not a great way to sort of be getting information.
So if sending you one of 500 copies of a press release is not the ticket to be getting your issue covered, talk to me more about that personal engagement. I mean, are these people being pitched with 100 story ideas, or are they just dodging most of those, or do they just tell me how do you rise out of the noise, given that it sounds like you guys have got this fire hose spewing at you?
Right. So I think one of the really good ways to rise out of the noise is to realize that there's a fire hose and just because we haven't responded to your email doesn't mean we haven't read it, and just because we haven't responded to your email doesn't mean we don't like it, and like feel free to send it again in a week, but also like don't have your feelings hurt if we just decide not to write you back. I would say also like actually tell us what you're doing, and talk to us sort of like person to person, and we're very interested in hearing people's actual stories, and just getting a simple email that's sort of saying what you're doing and why it's important is very helpful. I would say to that too, sort of part and parcel of being a journalist, especially in a site like ours where you're writing very broadly, is you're sort of a mile long and an inch deep in a lot of things. And so, when we write a story, we do a fair amount of research and learn a lot about it, and we know sort of broadly what is happening, but we are not necessarily experts in everything. So a really helpful thing when we're communicating with people is for them to help us sort of like contextualize the issue that they're trying to solve and the problem and why it is important, because we don't necessarily know that. So
are they doing that? Are they sending you a 3-paragraph email that's much more background to get in the door? Or, I think people are still struggling with, so how do I do this?
I would say 3 short paragraphs. But I think so let's say you are a, company that's installing solar in Africa. I think you would want to tell me why that's important, why that's important, what the issues are, how you're solving it, and how you're solving it differently from every other solar in Africa company that we have written about or not written about. And I think if you get those points in there, that will be compelling, and we will email you back and ask for more information.
So shortly I'll be going around for questions, and we're going to spend most of the time in Q&A, but I want to make sure I work in a couple more and then grab some of yours, and I have some secret ones in my back pocket as well. But you're here.
Yeah.
You're here at the Skoll event, So tell us a little bit more about why, with that busy schedule, you're taking several days to come to a conference. Do you come to a lot of conferences?
No, we don't come to a lot of conferences. I would say, we try to spread it out with the people to go meet people, but obviously, given the schedule, you come to a conference, it's sort of you're digging out for a long time after that, so it's like a sacrifice you have to think about making. But meeting people in person is obviously helpful, and having all these people who are really great and important in one place so we can knock them out is also really good. So that is why we're here. And also, I think I'm here doing this partially because I would love to impart some of these things, because I feel like we definitely miss stories because we get bad pitches from people, and and so fixing that feels like it will help everyone.
Well, and that's good to know, because certainly my experience is, most of the Skoll Award winners are not fast-talking Americans. Okay, they're actually out there doing incredible things in the world. And I think there's not a lot of expertise. I have these kind of conversations. People say, "Yes, we're only serving 250,000 people this year in this state of India, and we're supposed to be 500,000." It's like, oh, my heart bleeds for you. But I think So how do you actually interact with some of the social entrepreneurs who culturally, tooting your own horn is rude and not done, and often they start by telling you for 3 minutes how unworthy they are to be speaking to you. But yes, they're doing the most fabulous thing. So how do you encourage them to kind of get beyond that without completely leaving behind who they are and what they do?
Sure. I will say, you mentioned that yesterday. That is not something that I have necessarily encountered, but so maybe we just didn't understand that it was a cultural thing.
That's part of the stuff you're missing, actually, because these are people who are not tooting their own horn.
I think, there's a fine line. I would certainly super tooting your own horn really turns us off also, right? So it's not like that.
Colleagues, you know who you are.
I think we are at Fast Company sort of because we're a business magazine, very focused on sort of the solutions part of these things, and so I don't know if this helpfully answers your questions, but hearing about that they're serving 250,000 people, that gets us,
Right.
right? So it's like the numbers are what gets us more than anything else.
Yeah.
And so as long as you're being like real about those, like, and they are in what we're hearing about, that will certainly help.
And I do want to mention, I mean, Skoll actively tries to train their award winners, but also people who attend the conference on how to tell a better story. They have a partnership with Sundance,
Right.
and a lot of it is about how in 30 or 60 seconds they actually have some of those hooks that might actually go, oh, I
Right.
might be interested in this.
But then I would say also,
Yeah.
like, it's very important to sort of know who you're pitching and use different hooks for different people, right? So like, those are the hooks that will get us. I think there are probably other places where the sort of more human interest story about the people who you are serving are the ones that will get you in the door. I think there are other places where it's, you know, and we sort of definitely err on the side too, where it's the story of you as a social entrepreneur and like your story of the work that could work too. And so I think you have to, one pitch doesn't work for every place that you're pitching.
I want you to spin that out a little bit more, because I think people don't always know, and there's two halves to this. I think one half is just like when you go out and raise funding, right? You read up, what does this funder fund, and what grants have they given? So if they've never ever funded your area, or anyone who ever looks like you, maybe it's not worth your time or their time to waste their time. I think it's the same thing with journalists. Read some of their pieces and actually figure out what angle they take and what their publication represents. There are other things that you may not see, and I think you've mentioned some of them to me, that are media specific. So for example, you need more than just a story, you need...
Sure. Images. Please send me pictures. We won't have the money or time to send photographers to take pictures of your thing. Our website, if you go to it, has giant, giant pictures that we need to put something in. And if you come to me and say, and we took these amazing high-res pictures of it, and here they are, look what that will do to your article, that totally changes the calculus of whether we're going to do a story or not. And so, you know, whatever assets you can bring to bear in offering in your pitch totally changes things. One thing I'd like to jump on about your reading other things, just little inside journalist pet peeve, do not do the thing where in your email you say, I read and really liked X story, and it's the first story that is listed on their thing of like the stories that the journalist wrote. Everyone does it. It's very transparent, and it is a real turn off. Like, find a story that is, you know, fits in with your pitch, or just don't, or just be broader in your phrase.
And this goes for other kinds of media. For example, if you're going to be pitching local TV news, you know, they're going to be asking about what kind of video are we going to be able to take, given that we will send out a crew. And if you get to talk to network news, and actually there are network news editors here, there's people from PBS and Frontline, I mean, incredible outlets are here. They really have to figure out how they're going to tell a cool story with really compelling visuals that you have to actually deliver. So just telling them why you're so cool isn't actually enough, because that's like 1/3 of what they need to hear before they actually think that they have a
I mean,
story.
I will say, so we make a fair amount of videos about, you know, young we do a big video series every year on young social entrepreneurs, and the question is always like, so we're going to interview them, and that's, you know, and then when we cut to B-roll over them interviewing, what is it going to be? And a lot of times what makes it or breaks it is that sometimes they're just people working in an office, and that is really boring B-roll to cut to from someone talking. And like, we'll do it sometimes if the person is really compelling, but it just doesn't make a good video. And
so let me explain what B-roll is, just in case there's some people who don't know. It's the same thing about, it's expensive to have a crew, a professional crew, shooting a video. And so often people will say, do you have some video that we can have like going on in the background as the voiceover by the journalist is going? So maybe something from the field. You know, if you work in another country and you're being interviewed in a wealthy country, can you bring video from Afghanistan or Southern India or Latin America that actually is good quality enough video to serve in the background? And often nonprofits don't have this. And so one trick that I've used is when we do get a crew to go with us, we say, could we have some of this as B-roll? Because it turns out that they use very little of the video they shoot.
Indeed.
And depending on what the policy is of the video, you know, whoever's doing the video and what their deal is with the media outlet, sometimes they'll just go ahead and hand that to you. which is not something they typically do. But because people here tend to be doing social good things, the videographers often fall in love with you and the people you're serving. And this. Another thing that we've done is pay the travel expenses of academic filmmakers, like university professors in film, and they will go to like a place like Liberia, and they'll shoot a video, and they'll make a documentary for their own purposes, but then we get a bunch of B-roll, and we get a short kind of, it's a documentary. It's not quite the same thing as an independent journalistic outlet covering you because you've helped finance this, but that often is a great source for B-roll. So I want people to start thinking about questions, and I know we have some folks with mics. I see there's a question here, so let's go ahead, but wait for the mic, and where's the, yes, could you give it to this gentleman right here, please? Are there other people who want to ask questions? Okay, good, all right, great.
Super helpful tips. I'm curious, who do you want to hear from? A lot of these organizations can't afford to have their own in-house PR, and they'll often hire out-of-house PR. Is it okay to hear from a PR agency or an ad agency reaching out to you, or is that kind of like a press release?
Yes, it is. It's okay. Like, I would always rather hear from the actual person. Journalists and PR people have like a complicated relationship, I think, in that we are sort of symbiotic, but also sometimes don't like each other, right? I mean, I don't know that anyone would deny that. I think like certainly there are PR people who we have very good relationships with who feed us a lot of stories. There are PR people who I've never heard of who send me an email, and then it's sort of a cold email from a PR person, which is definitely on a lower level than cold email from a social entrepreneur themselves. That said, PR people can be incredibly helpful, and they're, I'm sure, incredibly helpful to you in that they create sort of a buffer and are doing a lot of the work and have the contacts, and that's great. I mean, I would say it's sort of the same. It's the same thing about sort of knowing your audience. Like I would say ask who your PR person has like worked with before, and like there are PR people who we know and we will respond to, and who are good, and then there are PR people who, like I said, start every email with, I really enjoyed your story about random thing. So that is what I would say my answer is, but it's always better to get an email from you.
And I want to add a couple examples. We couldn't afford a PR person, but when we launched the Benetech brand, it was sort of a relaunch about 15 years ago after we sold our main social enterprise. We spent about $50,000 on a Silicon Valley PR agency who told us it would have cost us 150 grand if they were doing it for a venture startup. Of course, that's what they always tell you. But we got a feature-length story in the Chronicle of Philanthropy as a result, as well as some smaller stories in major media outlets. And then the campaign went for 6 months, including all the prep work. It was over. We couldn't afford it anymore. But we had sort of that benchmark story in the major publication that funders read. And that reporter from 15 years ago, I send her 2 emails a year on what we're doing. And 2 years goes by, nothing. And then this year, in the last 6 months, I've gotten 2 quotes in the Chronicle of Philanthropy, which is a place I would love to be quoted in. And all I need to do is make sure that she knows what I'm up to, so that when she's doing a story, it's not going to be about me or my organization. It's going to be a story where I can give her a quote as an independent person with this sort of, or this point of view that's going to help her get this story done. And that's that relationship thing. And when I do have a big story, I'm probably going to call her and 2 or 3 other reporters in order first, saying, I have a great story, it's going to be new. And that's the relationship thing that takes a really long time to build. But we kicked it off with a PR agency, and we've never been able to afford a PR agency since. But it worked for us just to have that one time. I think there's a gentleman right here who has the mic. So
to build on that a little bit, it feels like that what I'm seeing a lot of lately for organizations that can't afford a PR firm is the sort of paid campaign. So I'm curious if Coexist is sort of, if that's a part of your business model. And if it is,
explain a paid campaign, because most people don't know what you're talking about.
So working with a media platform that that takes the sort of pitch, lets the idea sort of percolate internally, comes up with content. The organization, like a Coexist, maintains editorial control, but the organization is sort of giving this sort of general idea of the message they'd like to convey. So platforms like DevX, for example, in the US, which is
Sure.
a development platform, are doing that. So I'm just curious, A, if Coexist, if that's a part of your business model, and if it's not, what do you think about that?
Right. So like what we call in the industry custom content, which can sort of range from that, which is like the best example, to whatever big multinational being like, write about what we sell. It's a very complicated and hard thing for journalists and journalism right now.
That's the question.
Yeah. So at Fast Company, we definitely do some custom content. It's like very siloed in that like the editors, it's like a different team, and so like how I feel about it is it pays the bills, and it's one thing, and we do something like different on the site, and I think that, I think a lot of the debate in the journalism world is like whether readers are smart enough to know what the difference is or not, and I sort of like fall on the side of that they do, and so it's okay to sort of like have them mixed in the same place. So I think it's definitely like if you can afford it and like it's going to happen, like I don't think it's like a horrible thing that like you should go to hell for. So like yeah, it's definitely like it's a new and emerging form of storytelling and like journalism, and it exists, and it's a thing to do.
Great, we have someone there, and then, okay, we have two over here. Okay, three, okay.
Hello. Hello.
Hi.
So I just want to know, I have two questions. The first one is, to what extent you prefer tech stories to non-tech stories, even in the social impact space? So if it doesn't involve a software or a website, to what extent you want to cover this? And the second one, like why certain journalists, like they don't want to write about something if there is entrepreneur.com or another major magazine wrote about it before, because they want to be the first to announce it. So how to manage this? Thank you.
Right. So for us, I would say like with the tech angle isn't that important. I would say like the innovation angle is really important. So like what we like to avoid is like writing about someone that's not like, I'm gonna say this and it sounds bad, but it's just true. Like if there are 10 water startups and they're all like doing the exact same thing, just in different places and serving different people, and we write about one, we're not going to write about the other 9. And like, that's just sort of a sad fact of life, and like I would love to write about all of them, but like we have to serve our readers as much as helping to sort of foster this movement, and so like that will just get boring.
And is the corollary, if it got covered in a sort of competitive outlet, it's like okay, one's gone, okay, there's 8 more.
So I think that like that is a very sort of like interesting debate that like we have internally in our newsroom, and I think people definitely fall on both sides of the line. I am of the firm belief that like there are a billion people on the internet, and so like if 100,000 people have seen the entrepreneur.com story, there are still plenty of people who have not seen our story, and like I would like them to look at it. There are people certainly who are not going to feel that way. I think like certainly like if someone in our competitive set wrote something yesterday, I'm not going to write something the next day, right? Because like then I just look like I'm copying them. But like I'll write about it in 2 weeks, or like I'll email you and be like, what can you give me that you didn't give that? Like, is there some, so like, there's certainly like a negotiation that can go on, right? But I think some people certainly, and it depends on who your editor is and like who the writer is, some people would say, oh, they got it, we didn't, like it's over. And there's just nothing you can do about that. That's sort of like a business decision that they've made.
Yeah. No, I mean, so I'm pitching a major network executive. It's like, we're looking for like Malala. Do you have any thing like Malala? That's kind of hard to duplicate, But if you've got one, go for it. But a lot of us mere mortals are actually kind of working at a slightly different level, and that's why we're really glad that you have to write so many articles in a day, because there's only so many Malala articles you could actually do. So I know we have this lady at the end of the second row here, and then the lady in the back.
Okay. If you don't mind, I'm the former head of CNN International, the news network here in the outside the United States, and I think you make some really good points. I was going to, if you don't mind, reinforce a couple of them.
Great.
You need to know your audience. You need to know who you're pitching. So if it's Fast Company, you need to know what Fast Company, what it serves, and how you're going to position your thought process there. And you need to know who Fast Company serves, its audience. And very generally, I can tell you that the news-consuming, the information-consuming audience right now is a very feeling-based audience. They want a connection with people. So you're going to want to have some way for them to connect, and that's typically a face, a story, a personal account, something that ties everybody to that story. And it helps when you guys have that. We don't have to try to find it. You really do want to make sure that if there's a participation quality in your story, you emphasize it. People want to be able to help and participate somehow. If you're doing a big group event, that's considered participatory. So make sure you can reinforce that. And then the last thing that's really important, because we're a curious mind, is aha moment. So when he talks about something new and different, everybody wants that sense of I learned something, I'm surprised by something. It's really hard to find, but most of you are already in that space doing that. So know that you want to emphasize that particular moment. I will tell you, you can shoot your own video this day and age. People want authentic and real. They're very much into witness accounts. It's an experience they want to have. There's a thing we use at CNN called Show Me, Don't Tell Me. So you can shoot your own video. In this day and age, we're getting pretty high quality video. So don't feel like you got to hire somebody to shoot it for you. Shoot your own.
There's a $500 camera that will do a great job.
Yes, it's so true. And it feels more real. I'm telling you, the video that you shoot will feel far more real than anything I pay somebody to go shoot, unless they're doing witnessing or experiential. I would tell you to start small. Don't worry about getting to Fast Company, which would be fantastic, by the way. Not to self-serve. I love your magazine.
Thank you.
But getting into a local environment may be easier for you, and then you can use that story to tempt him.
When I would also say, you don't need, we read those things to find stories, right? So you don't, you might not even need to pitch us if you get a smaller thing. The internet is sort of things just rise up, right? And then a lot of times, I don't want to take credit, but we will write something, and then a few weeks later, there will be a New York Times story about it, right? Yeah. So that's how these things work. So once you get in the door, you're already winning, and it's not necessarily from you that we will find out about your story at that point.
And there's services now that aggregate, so they go out there and they search for stories that we're interested in and surface them up to us. So a small story at a local level will come to us, but you can also share it. And then the last thing I would tell you is use social media. So we're very much a referral recommendation culture. At this point in time, right now, you are more likely to look at a story a friend tells you than anything I run on CNN. And social media allows that. And I would tell you two facts about social media. News consumers particularly favor Facebook to the tune of 87% in the United States. So they're on Facebook. And you can reach a lot of people if you take a Facebook page out, you put everybody you can on it, so they bring in all of their communities. You can reach a lot of people that way. And the other thing I can tell you is Twitter is not consumed in the United States. Very important fact here. In the United States, by news consumers, the numbers fall under 14% down into the 9 and 7% range. So tweeting something gets our attention because we live in the world of Twitter, but it is not necessarily the best way to reach your audience, your consuming, news-consuming audience. So,
right.
I
so
love...
just to emphasize what you said, all journalists, journalists are the only people on Twitter at this point.
It feels like that.
So, if you want to get to us, we're all on there, and then I don't know who else is teenagers, or not, I don't know. But really, it's just journalists talking to each other and then finding stories.
And I'm going to take advantage of this because this is one of the topics I wanted to tackle, and I know we have some other people in the audience that are kind of like you, an expert in their area. So I wanted to go a little bit further into social media because I know it's part of the questions, and I think you kind of hit on it. And it's we use both mechanisms. We run a website that serves 350,000 students in the U.S., and we reach them through Facebook. Right, because that's how we're going to actually talk to them. And we do tech support through Facebook, and we try to engage their parents. But when we're talking to policymakers and journalists and donors, we're actually doing it in Twitter. And what we do is we try to have essentially a voice that's not only our activities, our press releases, they're really blog posts that we then tweet up to our audience. And we're really trying to get these to certain narrow audiences. I will send a blog post to a donor, or I'll send a blog post to a congressional staffer or something like that to engage them. But that's narrowcast as opposed to the how do you reach the big consumer, which is like Facebook. And I think we have a guy from Upworthy here.
Yeah, I don't
right?
feel comfortable talking about anything social with Adam in the room.
Can we actually get a mic to the gentleman? Because I think that these guys know that field. So do we? Thank you. And we will get back to you and you. But I just think that this was a moment to exploit. So.
What do you want to know?
Well, can you introduce yourself and then talk about how a site like Upworthy, I think kind of working on your point, how social entrepreneurs can actually get some coverage. Because when you guys put something on Facebook and social media, it goes.
Sometimes it does.
We'll talk about that just a little bit so people know what we're talking about. Because I'm not sure everyone knows the
Also,
phenomenon.
this is a good preview for Adam's talk, which is in this room right after this, so you can just stay and hear more.
I'm Adam Mordecai from Upworthy. I'm the editor at large. So I get pitched stuff constantly, and people will tweet stuff at me and all kinds of things at me. If you're pro advice, if you're pitching Upworthy people, don't pitch it in an Upworthy style headline. We're getting rid of our Upworthy style headlines, and we don't want the curiosity gap being tweeted at us because we just need to know what we are covering. So what we're looking for is that human story, as she was saying. Like the way you really grip people on a massive scale is by finding out, is by connecting to them on a personal level. And like you can give people all the data in the world, but it's not going to move them to change who they are or what they know about you unless there's something more compelling underneath that makes them connect to you first. So, those human stories that you're telling, get somebody who's skilled at filmmaker storytelling, not necessarily like dry documentary style, but can actually find that emotional resonance of whatever issue or cause you're working on and tell your story in a compelling way that makes it attractive for us to be able to share that with the world. So we're looking for something that will reach everybody and make them think about the world a little better. So we need those things that connect you first and then bring in the amazing things you're accomplishing. And again, press releases, you shouldn't be putting your press releases on Facebook. You shouldn't be using them as a way to get to people. Like you really need to talk to, we're all humans and we like to be engaged with on a normal level and not blasted at. So that's the most efficient way to get stuff to us. You can tweet them at us if you have like compelling stories. Just make sure that they're actually something that's really important to say rather than just something that you're passionate about that doesn't actually, if it's just like a software thing where you're just trying to make money, that's not really our jam.
Right.
It's more about like institutional changes and things like that.
I would say, I'd like, just to add on that, like the most important thing is that like, as journalists, like we're trying to tell stories, right? So like, always remember that there needs to be a story in what you are trying to get us to write about. So like a lot of times we'll write about a company and then they'll, we'll have a relationship with them and then they'll keep giving us updates, but the updates stop being we've raised $100,000 is not, or $1 million is not a story. That's just like a fact, and I can't really write an article about that, right? Like there needs to be some sort of conflict and resolution and solution and something that like moves people. And so like getting the little updates is good, but that's not going to turn into an article for us unless there is a narrative there.
This is something I think a lot of social entrepreneurs learn with great difficulty because we're very proud of what we do. And actually, the average person is very non-interested in our novel hybrid financing structure.
Right.
They want to know, some young girl whose life was completely transformed by, your intervention. And that is the hook. Journalists want to know there's something real behind that this is not the one cherry-picked story that is like, the exception to all the rules. But, and I think, just to go with Upworthy, I married a musician. And my wife took reluctantly to technology, but she's a Facebook lover. And I think that she never posts my business tweets, anything to do with my nonprofit, but I get an Upworthy story a week from my wife because to a real consumer, it's a story that excites them and they want to share with their friends. Yeah. And I think that's the kind of story that I think you're looking for, right?
And to the end of how your thing helps people, there's a lot of content and organizations out there, to be sort of frank, that there's this thing called white savior where they come in and save the day and help that cause, and now they're all better because of these people, when it's actually the people on the ground doing the work that matter. So if you're thinking about doing those stories, don't make it about your CEO, make it about the community and what they're actually doing to accomplish this stuff, not about how your product is the thing that made that happen, because it is actually their work that's actually making that happen, and we've had enough of that in the world, so yeah.
And I know it's, I think Dave gets the mic next. You still up, Dave? Yeah. So, okay, great. So, because I think we need to, but that was very cool. Thank you very much to both of you for intervening, because we're really glad that you're here.
I want to raise a question about motive.
Okay.
So, from both of your point of view. So, what are you trying to accomplish by getting your name or your organization's name publicized? You're really trying to do some good, right?
Right.
And so you want to tell a story about a good story, but your motive is what? It's donors. It's awards that may lead to donors.
Less so.
Or it's getting your name in the news in order to be able to tell your mother.
No, okay. Do you want me to go ahead and
talk about that.
okay?
And what do you think about motives when you hear the pitches?
Well, let me tell you about motives as the social entrepreneur, and you tell me what your reaction is to that, right? So one thing is, we don't have an advertising budget usually, okay? And so often the media is a cost-effective way to reach the community that we want to help, right? So for example, we serve disabled kids. I can't take out an ad in the New York Times, right? But if I get someone to write a story about some disabled kid who they never thought would graduate from high school and now he's gotten into college, then that means that another parent will go, why isn't my kid getting their service? It's free, and because it's free, I don't have the money to advertise it. So it's this interesting kind of dynamic. So social impact, I think, is got to be the first and foremost thing. Is more of our mission is first. If you do that, yes, we want more donors, but that's often a narrower cast message than the kind of messages we're using in the press. There are better ways to reach donors than to get most stories. But a Fast Company, a New York Times, donors do read those outlets and they will share stories. And so your local newspaper, maybe you get a local philanthropist. And then the last thing is, a lot of us are engaged around policy. And politicians care deeply about how interested the electorate is in an issue. And so often you have an advocacy component, or you're joining a coalition in advocacy, and part of your job is to do this. So like when the internet was shut down over bad laws in the U.S., we were probably 88th out of 90 organizations fighting it, but we had a story on how this kind of law was going to hurt disabled kids and human rights groups as opposed to Google and the like. And so our little voice was an important voice. So I think those are our motivations. So what's your reaction when someone says, I want more social impact, I want to reach the people I want to help, I want more donors, and I want a policy change?
I think, great, fabulous.
Are you okay with that?
No, so I would say that I feel the best about my job at two times. One, when I hear that our readers have taken advantage of something that we've written about, because then we're actually serving them and helping them. Or two, when I hear from one social enterprise that we've covered that they heard about another one and have connected since then and are creating something together.
Partnership, cool.
I will say though that this makes me think of something which I think is very important. I don't know if I have this metaphor quite right. Like we are like, so okay, obviously there's like a spectrum of sort of journalism from objective to subjective, right? And I think we're somewhere in the middle in that I think we're trying to advance this cause, but we are, not straight advocacy journalism like some other people. But I would say that what is important, and a thing that has come up a bunch, is that like, so this is maybe the bad metaphor, we're on the same side, but we are not on the same team.
Okay.
Which is important to realize. Like our service is to our readers, not to you, the social entrepreneur. So like, just a good example, I will leave out the specifics because I don't actually remember who it was. But so we wrote a story. I literally have no idea what it was about, but I could remember the exchange after. We wrote a story. The social entrepreneur gave us some quotes about his technology that he was working on. A few days later, emailed us and said, I revealed a little too much about this proprietary technology. It's affecting our funding. Do you think you could change the quote? And I can't change a quote after. You gave me a quote. I'm a journalist. It's not actually my job to help you get your funding.
And there is this internet problem about about once it's out there.
Yes, exactly. So and I sort of had to explain what on the record meant and everything else. But these things are important, and it's sort of the baseline of what we're doing. And so while I would love to write about people who are doing important projects and have them get all the funding in the world, that is not actually my end goal. And I think it's important to realize that our goals are parallel but not necessarily intersecting.
The lady in the back who's been very patient. Thank you.
Well, working for Merck for Mothers. So after 12 years of being on the social entrepreneur NGO side, I'm in a bizarre situation where I'm leading a massive corporate commitment to support social entrepreneurs and NGOs, which is great. And we have brilliant stories, and we have a media team and a PR team and all the resources. But my problem's slightly different, that actually, as soon as our organization gets mentioned or Merck's PR team picks up the phone to the journalist, despite the fact that the story is great of the social entrepreneur that we're trying to highlight, or the NGO's word, I feel like it gets sort of murky, because it's you are Merck for Mothers, and that's great, but how much is this is about your MNC? And it's really not. We're purely trying to highlight the good work. And I'm just wondering if there's any tips to make it less murky, so I can really, it's really difficult for the NGOs and social entrepreneurs to make the pitches and all of that, because we have a machine that does that work.
But do you want the stories really about your partners as opposed to the company?
All about the story.
And you're still running into trouble.
Yeah, because the problem is it's my PR machine that's picking up the phone, and it's this is a call from Merck. You sell drugs. I'm well, that's not what we're talking about here.
Okay.
So I'd just love some tips on how I can sort of de-Merck the stories.
Yeah, I'm totally honest, I would feel weird about that phone call. I don't know. The thing that I don't know if this is can you sort of bring your PR team to bear on what they're doing and then have them do it themselves?
Yeah.
Can't your PR team write their pitch for them, but then have them send it?
This is what Skoll does, and a bunch of other more activist donors. There's a group of activist donors that not only give you a grant, but they give you surrounding services, and that includes it could be as much as executive development, recruiting, media is big. They'll bring consultants to bear, and I think that it's interesting. When Skoll calls up Frontline and pitches us, Frontline answers, because Skoll has given Frontline a lot of money over the years. But I understand in Merck's case, it may be better that you train your people up, and they're getting the benefit, all the professionals, and maybe even the contact that they should actually reach out to. But I don't know, because a lot of donors are providing that surrounding services, but maybe it's not what you actually want to be doing the legwork for them and doing the pitching for them. Anything else on that? On other tips, or I just want to. I didn't want to cut you off.
That's my tip.
Okay. Okay. So I think you're next, right here in the front, and then there's a gentleman there, and yes, right back here. Okay, so we got 3. Okay, please.
There was a recent article, I can't remember who it was from, but they were talking about, well, when you're portraying homelessness, that make sure you use the stereotypical image of a homeless person. Otherwise, you won't get covered and people won't respond. One of the aspects of what we're trying to do is provide dignity to our beneficiaries. It's one of our core values. How do you have any tips or advice for? We don't want to plaster our beneficiaries' photos over everything to tell our story. How do you go about telling a story but still respecting your beneficiaries and not using B-roll footage or photos of them where obviously it's not a dignified thing to plaster them over as being helped?
The disability field is very sensitive to this. It's called the Jerry's Kids phenomena, right? Let's fundraise by showing really obviously visually disabled kids and make people feel really terrible about them. And I think that most of the social enterprise field has the same attitude you are. We don't do charity to the communities we work with. We work in partnership for social change with, they could be our customers, they could be our workforce, they could be our supply chain, whatever it might be. And so, so what we do in the disability field is, as the organizations that work in partnership, is we say, how do you want to be portrayed in the media? And especially in the disability field, there's, people do people first language, right? That's not the blind. That's a person who's blind, or something like that, person first language. So we just listen to the community about how they want to be represented, and we do walk away from stories that, say, this person's life benighted by blindness. We're like, time out, right? We're talking about empowerment here, right? I want to hear a story about how, this blind person volunteered to help other blind people, and it's great, So I know but I think the community has the primary voice in that, and we have to channel that when we pitch them, basically, to make sure that we don't go off message for essentially their advocacy and respect campaign. So I don't know if you have other.
No, I think that's
okay. So yes, the gentleman right there, and then Valeria, and then yes.
Thanks. I just want to bring a slightly different perspective, not being a social entrepreneur, having done about 15 years of consumer internet and a lot of PR. A couple of things that people have mentioned. One, who's your audience? Everybody wants to do PR, but who are you trying to get to? Are you trying to get to institutionals? Or are you trying to get to the public? And I think typically PR really gets you to the public. Sometimes it's a justification for institutionals or donors, but really trying to understand, because as you can realize by having the insight of a journalist here, it's hard to get any journalist to write about you, let alone multiple journalists. Second insight, I think we all have networks. Let your network do some PR for you. So we want to control the message often, but I think if you distill your message, let people, and I think you were mentioning small is great. You get a small story here, a small story there, because you don't know when the big one's going to hit. So shooting for the big one is a tremendous amount of work with a tremendous amount of uncertainty. And by the way, no offense, in today's world, that bar has gotten really high. I mean, it used to be that you could get the evening news in France and you hit, 30% of the population. That doesn't happen anymore. Oh. Facebook and social media, we were talking about Facebook in terms of having your own page, having your own content. That's great. Another thing that you should really consider is testing on Facebook paid media. So there is it's nearly impossible for you to see in your stream today on Facebook what's an ad and what's real content. Now take that as an advantage, which is you don't know what's interesting to the public, right? And what's interesting is not what is interesting to me. It's really what's interesting, even for you, I presume what's interesting is what's interesting to your readers.
Indeed.
And so you don't know. Well, you can test, and you have 4, 5, 6, 7 different stories. And I would say, rough back of the envelope, if you put $500 behind a paid ad on Facebook, you will get a definite read as to, does this resonate, does it not? And by the way, it'll bring traffic back to your page. So those to me are, PR has its purposes, but in terms of a media strategy, Facebook paid advertising that looks like a story, that doesn't look like an ad, is incredibly powerful for testing. And I think it's underutilized by social entrepreneurs.
And I'll mention, we have been a Google Ads grantee for 10 years. They give us $10,000 a month of advertising for free. And because, like a lot of we're not aiming at everybody, right? We're aiming at a very narrow audience. So the search terms that we want to buy are actually affordable. And we don't even pay for that. So we've tried Facebook advertising. It hasn't worked well enough for us to justify the money. But since Google's giving us the advertising for free, it's not as good, but it's free. And so we take advantage of it. I think the other thing, and I want to work in one other kind of thing that's not the kind of media we're talking to or have spoken today, but it's knowing your audience and it's knowing your network. It could be that there is a monthly publication in the field that you operate with that if you write a press release, they will publish it basically unedited. And this works for us really well because we want to reach special education teachers. If we serve up an article to the Special Education Membership Association Network, newsletter, they'll just publish it. Now, that's not real journalism if you just publish the press release, but it is reaching the audience and taking advantage of the network, and that marches over, right? What if it's not the newsletter, but the LGBT group says, best practices in our field, you might want to use these guys' software that's free and you can get it. I mean, that's as good as an endorsement in an advertisement. So
there are a lot of websites that will just rewrite a press release, basically too. So let's.
Yeah, but I'm talking about people that
sure.
the audience you really want to reach might have some very specialized pubs. I mean, you may have a really easy time getting coverage in the Chennai daily newspaper, but having a very hard time getting into the Times of India just because you may be the coolest thing in Chennai and Tamil Nadu, but you're not. So look for those, and I think that's a lot of what we've heard is like start there, because that actually spreads your network, and then you might actually get into these real zones. So I think Valeria's in the back, and then
I want to thank you because this has been full of very useful advice that you can go and kind of apply tomorrow. But I have a question for you. You have some advice about how to weave complexity into a story. Because a lot of the social entrepreneurs are dealing with very difficult, wicked problems. And they don't just want to inform, they wanted to educate. They want people to understand that this is not a hero story. You're required to put a lot of people to work with you in order to get anything done. But that kind of gets lost when you are talking about the person or this little story or the hero story or something else. And sometimes comes back and creates problems for the social entrepreneur because everybody says, oh, look at this. No, they are in the first, page, whatever. And what about us being helping them? We're the politicians, or we are the who. So, anything you can say about that, I would really appreciate it. Thank you.
I mean, I'd say a couple of things. I would I think this is like a prime example of how our need, even the people covering this, our needs are not always in sync, right? We have to write a 500-word article about a thing that is a problem that literally no one can solve. Those things don't actually go together very well. So I would say we particularly, not to toot our own horn, but are very pro complexity. And sort of our basic article format is problem, solution, and then the problems with the solution, basically. And so we really try to embrace that. That said, there's obviously always hundreds of things we are leaving out, hundreds of people and other organizations that we're leaving out. And I don't actually know that there's a great solution. I mean, except in that you, I think, have to weave it together as you're sort of presenting it. It's what I was saying before about us not being super experts. If there are other things involved and other factors involved, that needs to come out in your interview, and don't count on us to know to figure that out for you. I would say you shouldn't be shy about presenting as much of the complexity to us as possible, and you do have to at that point leave it to us to maybe cut some of it out, and that's just we're sorry, but but don't but give it all to us and sort of let us try to do our jobs.
I think there's a gentleman in the middle of this row, and then the lady in pink, and then did I see a hand over here? Okay.
I can make it.
I'll go for first.
I can make it very fast. I work for Google.
Okay.
I don't work in the ad space.
Okay.
So, but if you just search for Google for nonprofits, there's a whole suite of things, including the AdWord campaign that any nonprofit will have access to.
Yeah. Great, thank you for that. The lady in pink there, and then there's someone over here. But anyway.
I want to go in a little opposite direction, and that is when there's a story that's out that you don't believe accurately reflects what you think, and particularly if it's a journalist who's done a slam of the organization. I'd love your or slam of the activity.
Sure.
And of course you think it's all wrong and misguided and all the rest of it. And assuming you do actually think that, what is your advice about the question of whether one offers an assiduous defense and gives more airtime to that, or lets it be, but that's the impression that the reader has?
That's a good question. I mean,
I want a good answer.
Okay. I feel like this is more like maybe more a PR question than a journalist question. I would say like if things are factually wrong, get those corrected. I think like if things are perceptionally wrong, like I would say just like it's always better to leave like another article about when things go wrong for people and then they're trying to defend themselves, and so there's another article about the thing that went wrong. It always personally seems to me like that was a bad decision because it's just reminding people of like a bad thing. And
what's it called, the Barbra Streisand effect?
Yeah, exactly. Yes, the Barbra Streisand effect was she had a wedding and paparazzi took pictures from a helicopter, and she tried to sue them so that they couldn't publish the pictures, and so then everyone published the pictures, and it would have been better.
100 times more people saw them as a result of them suing them.
So like I would say that like always correct things that are factually wrong, and I think like most journalists, even if they slammed you, will fix a thing that is like empirically incorrect. But I think like sometimes people are going to write bad, like we who are a very supportive, like positive part of the press, sometimes there's a thing we don't like and we write a mean article about it. And someone then talking about how we wrote a mean article about it just links people back to our mean article.
Yeah, and Kiva went through this at a Skoll World Forum where they showed up, and I think they got some tough press coverage because they actually lend to microcredit organizations rather than directly to the borrowers. And they had always sort of said that, but it was hard to find that so clearly enunciated.
Yeah.
And so their fabulous program took it on the chin, basically being accused of misrepresenting it. It actually wasn't factually incorrect what was said, though.
Right.
This is the way it actually worked. And Kiva, got a lot of help, and they're a great group, and they've, not only gotten clearer about that linkage, but they've also launched a major program to lend directly to individuals.
Yes.
And so I think it all worked out. But boy, when the heat was on, it was like the world was ending. But they came through, and I think came through stronger. But a counterattack against the journalist wasn't going to work. It was just being clear on their websites and just waiting it out, and then just keep on doing a good job. But it's a tough period. I want to go ahead and get you. I'm trying to get fresh people here because we're down to our last 10 minutes. So this is sort of going to be the last round of questions. Is there anyone else who wants to make? Okay.
I was actually just going to address that last question because I work as a journalist. I work freelance, and I do a number of outlets focusing on social innovations. And I've had people come back to me and say, you changed the wording. But the thing is that maybe you don't realize this when you're speaking to journalists, but sometimes people have a tendency to speak in heavy jargon, even in this space. Mm-hmm. And so we have to digest that and make it so that it's, readable and understandable for the common man. And so I've had people come back to me and say, well, you took out strategic stakeholders or something like that. But I
my
said,
branding says it's supposed to be here.
And I said, but I'm sorry, this is not your website. Like this is, in a way to inform a reader that doesn't know anything about this space. So that's just, word of advice. Like when you're talking to journalists, be aware when you're talking to them that you're on the record, and if you do say something and they sort of rehash it so it's in simpler English, it's not that they don't like what you said, it's just trying to make it a little bit more palatable.
Yeah. This is a pain that a lot of people feel because they, journalists always oversimplify, right? And I'll tell you, I did a no-no. Factual errors are different, and I once wrote in the comment field to an online publication that the journalist had committed a factual error. And this guy was so ticked off at me. He said, look, all you had to do was send me an email and we would have fixed it. Don't diss me in public, basically.
Yeah. No one likes that.
And a lot of us don't really understand this, right? But in hindsight, it was really clear why that was a bad one. But anyway, so I think but you don't get to rewrite what people say or say that's too simplistic. It's like, no, that's your job. But if there's a number that's wrong or something's backwards, journalists are always really good about fixing that, is my experience. So yes. So.
Again, just two very quick questions. First is about Google Ads. Is it applicable for benefit corporations, like for-profit social entrepreneurs?
I'm pretty sure no, but yeah.
Oh, okay. And the second one, what's your take on the BuzzFeed model and like how to be like everything?
Define BuzzFeed model.
No, I mean like just is BuzzFeed just working, like how do they get their content and how are they working with social entrepreneurs and like impact stories, or are they just pushing for random stories that they curate themselves?
I'm at this point, thanks, Adam.
If you want to take this one.
BuzzFeed is so large at this point that it runs it both answers and doesn't answer every single question because they're literally doing everything. They are they source a lot of their stories from social and whatever the dress came from Tumblr, but then they're also doing some incredibly well done. Not that the dress wasn't well done. The dress was obviously incredibly well done. They're also doing some incredibly in-depth, amazing long-form reporting, and they have the money and the success that they can encompass everything from the littlest bit of internet ephemera to 20,000 word incredibly important policy changing stories. So in that sense, the BuzzFeed model is awesome. Great for them.
Okay, so we're now in the process of wrapping up. I wanted to make sure that if anyone had a last question, we get it in. There was, I think, one question that I wanted to ask, and then we'll go to wrap up. But I want to make sure. Yeah. So.
Is there really such a thing as off the record?
Okay, great question.
Are we on the record here?
Yeah. Yes. If you are talking to someone and you say, "Can we keep this off the record?" Unless they're a shitty person, it will be off the record. I think so what will happen though, like I said, everything is a negotiation. Certainly you'll write a story, you'll be interviewing the person in the middle, they'll be like, this is off the record. When they start to write it, they might call you back and be like, the thing that you said was off the record, can we put it on the record? Can I phrase it this way to put it on the record? You might have said something important that needs to go in the story. So it doesn't disappear from their memory, right? So they know it, and if it was interesting, they're going to try to find some way to get you to agree to put it in the article. But if you say it's off the record, it's off the record. I think the flip side to that is no one has to say on the record. Once you're on the phone, you're on the record, right? So that is really important to remember. It turns on automatically, but you have to specifically turn it off.
Yeah. Well, great. Well, the one question I wanted to ask is, most social entrepreneurs are under-resourced. I think we've heard that in a lot of different ways. And we're told to do a lot of things, right? And I mean, if you listen to everything you heard today, you could imagine 3 full-time comm staffers, cranking away on the social media stuff and writing the content, and it's, I don't know. I mean, do you tweet? Do you Facebook? I think Facebook. I think we've heard a lot about why that's where people are and why that's really important. And then there's, I think, what I would consider the journalistic-driven press that's still under pressure, but still a really key part of sort of quality control and reach. But I mean, people are telling us that we should all be on Medium now. And do you have any sort of things if you were a social entrepreneur with 25 or 40 people? What would you say to do to put them in a better position for that moment when they're actually trying to reach out to you and say, you should cover an important story about us?
Just be on Medium, I'd say. No, I would say, really think about storytelling, right? Mm-hmm. That is what we are trying to do. I think, really, in the end of the day, that's sort of what everyone is trying to do, and that's what drives everything. And so, as you're doing your work, consider the stories that you're trying to tell or the stories that you are generating. And a good story will rise to the top, and we are journalists, that's all we want, right? And so if you have a good story, we want to make a good story, we will help you turn it into a better story. And think about all the aspects that storytelling involves, Conflict and resolution is great. Like you said, an aha moment where you've discovered something is great. Moving images and pictures that make people feel things are great. You know, anything that creates actual emotion that's what's important. So I would say like those are the things you should be thinking about in your work and trying to capture, and then those are the things you should be taking to journalists to tell your story about what you're doing.
Well, that was terrific. Are there any last words that you want to work in about something you said, oh, I meant to say this, or there's one last thing I want to leave you with?
No, I think
that was a great wrap.
Great,
so,
yeah,
so
now you ruined it.
Oh, well, I tried. I'm not a journalist. I'm just,
yeah, there you go. I had a great kicker.
Yeah, okay, I stepped on his applause line. Can we give him a round of applause for a great job by Morgan?
Thank you.
Sorry about that. I should have recognized it as such. Yeah, okay.
And can we thank Jim too for doing such a great job?
Thank you, guys. I hope this has been a great start to your Skoll World Forum. Go out there, have a blast, network, make social change. Have fun.